The twin suns of Calvinar Prime gleamed overhead, casting golden beams through the crystalline domes of the Grand Accord Assembly. The structure itself was a marvel, hovering platforms of obsidian and gold-veined glass, ringed with fluttering banners bearing both human and serene crests. Soldiers stood like statues around the perimeter, every step precisely measured, every breath controlled. Inside, Captain Elias Ward shifted slightly beneath his gray Peace Division armor. He stood along the northern gallery overlooking the main chamber, flanked by two Earthborn diplomats in ceremonial robes. Tension coiled in his gut, not from nerves, but from experience. Too much had gone right, too smoothly. Peace talks never lasted this long without a crack forming. Below him, the serene delegation entered, tall, elegant, and unmistakably regal. At their head walked Princess Cassera, her orange fur sleek and groomed to perfection, her robes tailored in black and copper thread that hugged her lean, athletic frame. Her tails swayed in deliberate rhythm behind her, and the facial markings of royal lineage gleamed faintly with iridescent pigment beneath her amber eyes. Elias had read every classified brief on her: warrior, diplomat, survivor of 2 assassination attempts, the daughter of a warlord who once threatened to glass Earth's colonies. But she was different, or at least she claimed to be. She locked eyes with him for a moment, a flicker of something, not disdain, not recognition, but curiosity. Then the world exploded. A shock wave ripped through the chamber as fire erupted from the eastern corridor. The floor buckled, diplomats were hurled into the air like rag dolls, and the peace banners ignited mid-fall. Screams drowned out the chimes of ceremony as debris rained from above. Elias hit the marble hard, breath knocked out of him. Alarms blared, automated defense turrets snapped into motion, tracking targets they couldn't identify. Smoke poured in, choking out the sky. Protocol Greyfall, a voice screamed through his comm, evacuate high-priority personnel. Secure all royals. Elias's training took over. He was already on his feet, vaulting over a shattered bench toward the central gallery. Bodies lay still, some groaning, others silent. The acrid scent of burning metal and flesh clawed at his senses. A second explosion, this one closer, threw him sideways into a support pillar. His helmet cracked, his vision blurred, and through that haze he saw her, Cassera, pinned beneath a collapsed archway. Her once elegant robes were now torn and singed, one arm was twisted unnaturally, blood, blue, not red, soaked her side. Her crown was gone, her guards nowhere in sight, and her amber eyes were filled with pain and fury. Hold on! Elias yelled, dragging himself across the rubble toward her. Where are they? She growled through gritted teeth. Where are my guards? Where is Valen? He didn't answer. He didn't know who Valen was. All he knew was that she was hurt, and everyone else had left her behind. Elias dropped beside Cassera, his boots sliding in the dust and splintered stone. Smoke curled in from the shattered arches above. He coughed, blinking rapidly, trying to stay upright as his legs trembled from the blast concussion. A distant alarm whined through the structure, garbled by fire and metal distortion. Her eyes, sharp even through the pain, tracked him like a predator's, suspicious, untrusting. Her ears flattened slightly, the dark tips twitching at every nearby sound. I'm here to help, Elias said firmly, dropping his rifle and yanking open his field medkit. I don't need, she started, voice clipped. You're bleeding, princess, he cut her off, scanning her leg with his bioscanner. Femoral artery is intact, but the bones snapped. Your shoulder's dislocated, and you've got a burn along your left flank. You don't need pride, you need pressure bandages. She narrowed her eyes. You're human. Why would you care? He met her gaze evenly. Because you're not dead yet. A beat passed. Cassera exhaled slowly. Very well. Proceed. As Elias applied antiseptic foam to her leg, she hissed, gripping a broken metal bar beside her. Despite the obvious pain, she didn't flinch again. Instead, she watched him work, analyzing every movement. "You're trained," she noted. "Combat medic. 15 years. Saw more guts than glory." He wrapped the bandage around her thigh and secured a field splint. "You need evac." He muttered, switching on his comm. "This is Captain Ward. I have the Serene Princess, requesting immediate medevac from Grand Accord Plaza. Only static." He tried again. Nothing. The relay towers had gone down. Cassera stared at the ceiling, her voice low and bitter. "They invoked it." Elias looked at her. "What?" "The severance code," she said, almost spitting the words. "If a royal is incapacitated in battle or political ceremony, their guard is authorized to abandon them. It preserves the image of strength, no weakness must be witnessed." Elias froze. "You're serious? They left you?" Her voice cracked, just barely. "I bled, and they left." Elias looked toward the smoke-filled corridor. "Then they're cowards." Her gaze whipped back to him, surprised. "We don't leave people behind," he said. "Not where I'm from." Then, without warning, he slid his arms under her legs and shoulders and lifted her. She tensed instantly. "Put me down." "No," he said. "You'll die carrying me." "Then I'll die on my feet," Elias growled, stepping over a fallen girder. Cassera was silent for a long moment, her face pressed against his shoulder. Then, "Your species is illogical." Elias glanced at her. "We get that a lot." Behind them, the central dome of the Grand Accord collapsed with a thunderous crack, swallowing the summit hall in a cloud of fire and debris. Before them, the vast violet forests of Calvinar Prime waited, stretching beyond the burning skyline. Elias kept walking. The violet canopy of Calvinar Prime stretched above them like a curtain drawn across a bruised sky. Trees rose in towering spirals, their bark black and smooth, their leaves glowing faintly under the planet's twin moons. Low-hanging mist drifted through the underbrush, giving the forest an otherworldly, dreamlike stillness. But Elias wasn't dreaming. Every muscle in his body burned, his arms ached from carrying Cassara's weight, but he didn't stop, couldn't. She had fallen into an uneasy sleep against his chest, her tail occasionally twitching, her breath shallow. The stabilizer he'd injected earlier dulled her pain, but it was temporary. Without proper treatment, infection was only a matter of time. Elias pushed through a dense cluster of ferns, the leaves releasing bursts of pollen that shimmered in the air. His boots crunched on bioluminescent moss that pulsed with their movement. He paused near a fallen tree, gently easing Cassera down onto the moss. Her eyes flickered open, pupils narrowing in the dim light. "You should have left me," she murmured. "You're repeating yourself," Elias said, kneeling beside her to check the bandages. "Do you always argue when someone's saving your life?" "Only when they're doing it for the wrong reasons." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think my reasons are?" Cassera turned her face toward him, ears folding back slightly. "You're a soldier. Maybe you think keeping me alive gives your side leverage. Maybe you want a reward." He sat back on his heels, staring at her. "You really think I'd walk through smoke, fight off death, and carry you through alien wilderness for a damn political trophy?" Her gaze didn't waver. "You wouldn't be the first." He let out a breath, pulled a water flask from his belt, and offered it. She took it, their fingers brushing briefly. "I'm not here to use you," Elias said. "I didn't even know your name before today. All I saw was someone bleeding and alone." Cassera drank in silence, then, "My guards, they saw me injured and left. Protocol says they had no choice. But one of them, Valen, he was sworn to protect me until death. I trusted him." Elias said nothing. The pain in her voice was layered, wounds old and new mixing into one. "You ever been betrayed like that?" she asked suddenly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Different place, different people. Same ache. She looked at him again, this time with less suspicion. The forest around them buzzed with distant wildlife, chirps, low hums, fluttering things they couldn't see. Cassera exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. You should rest, Elias said gently, pulling his cloak from his pack and laying it over her. She blinked at the gesture, then looked away. I don't need comfort. No, Elias said softly, settling beside her, but you deserve it. She said nothing more. They sat in silence beneath the strange stars of Calvinar Prime, two fugitives from shattered worlds. And though neither would admit it, something had shifted between them. A crack in the armor. A sliver of trust in the darkness. The fog thickened as midnight approached. Calvinar's nocturnal chills slithered through the trees, curling around Elias like a living thing. He sat upright against the base of a curved root, eyes half-lidded, pulse steady. His rifle rested across his lap, uncharged, useless without a proper cell. Nearby, Cassera lay still beneath his cloak, her breathing calm, though he knew better than to assume she was asleep. She was a warrior, even now, wounded, exhausted, displaced, but alert. And something was wrong. Elias's instincts screamed, not sound, not motion, just pressure. The kind of heaviness that slid along the skin and coiled around the spine. He scanned the mist again, slow, deliberate. Wake up, he whispered. Cassara's eyes opened instantly, her ears perked. She was already halfway to sitting when the low growl came from the fog ahead. A shape emerged, hulking, low to the ground, its four legs ending in clawed talons. A native predator, its thick carapace glistening with damp heat, its eyes like twin shards of flame. Razor Hound, Cassara's voice dropped to a whisper. Its vision is motion-based. Don't move. Great, Elias muttered. Any more good news? It can hear your heartbeat. He froze. The creature sniffed, growled, and began circling the fallen tree. Cassara's hand crept toward a jagged piece of collapsed bark, not a weapon, just a distraction. Elias watched her, then slowly inched toward his satchel where a small signal flare was hidden. On 3, he mouthed. She nodded, pupils dilating, every fiber of her muscle primed. 1. The beast turned, muscles coiling for a pounce. 2. Its legs tensed. 3. Cassera threw the bark. The razor hound spun with terrifying speed. Elias yanked the flare and slammed it against the trunk. The sudden whoosh of red light exploded in the fog. The creature screamed, a shriek of pain and confusion, then barreled through the trees, blinded. They didn't waste the moment. Elias grabbed Cassera, lifting her onto his shoulder in a fluid motion. Her arm wrapped instinctively around his back, holding tight as he sprinted through the ferns. I was fine, she growled against his chest. You were bait, he shot back. Big difference. They didn't stop until the mist thinned and the trees opened into a jagged ravine. A stream ran through the center, shallow but fast-moving. On the far side, a small rock alcove offered shelter from sight and wind. He lowered her gently, both of them panting, slick with sweat and stung with adrenaline. She looked at him, lips parted, chest heaving, and for the first time she didn't look royal, she looked real. You saved us both, she said quietly. You're starting to sound surprised every time, Elias replied, dropping to sit beside her. I am, she admitted, but less than I used to be. The ravine was narrow and wind-worn, carved into the hillside like a forgotten scar. Snow drifted in from the upper cliffs, light, powdery flakes that caught on Elias's shoulders and melted into his skin. Above them, the forest canopy had thinned, letting in the soft silver glow of Calvinar's twin moons. Elias worked quickly, piling dry twigs and stripped bark into a shallow pit between the rocks. His hands moved with practiced precision, the motions automatic after years of field survival. With a spark and a twist of his igniter, a small flame flickered to life, casting golden warmth against the stone. Cassera sat just across from him, leaning back against the smooth wall of the alcove. Her cloak was wrapped tightly around her frame, but Elias could still see her fur glinting with dew, her ears twitching faintly with every shifting breeze. He handed her a steaming ration tin and a flask of warmed water. She accepted them wordlessly, watching the fire. "I was taught that humans were reckless, emotional, that your species would rather burn than yield." Elias leaned back with a grunt. "You're not wrong. But sometimes fire is the only thing that keeps you alive." She gave him a look. "That's not the kind of fire I meant." "I know." He poked the fire with a stick, watching embers rise. "You grew up believing all humans were enemies." "Worse," she said, voice distant. "I was raised to believe humans were fragile, weak in body, weak in will. I trained every day to be better than one. Faster, stronger, colder." Elias looked up. "How's that working out?" Cassera smirked, "Barely. You're irritating. Comes with the job." She fell silent again, eyes returning to the fire. Then quietly, "You've seen death, haven't you?" He didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said. "Too much of it." "Did you ever stop feeling it?" "No," he said, "and if you do, you've lost something you don't get back." She studied him, her expression unreadable. "That's the part my people never understood. They feared pain, emotion, they called it weakness. But you." She trailed off. He looked at her across the firelight, her face painted in flickers of orange and gold. "But me? You carry it, all of it, and still keep moving." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The fire crackled between them, pushing back the cold. Cassera shifted closer. "Your kind may be fragile," she murmured, "but you're hard to kill." Elias gave her a tired smile. "Told you. Stubborn." She laughed then, soft, surprised, genuine. And in that moment, something deep between them shifted. Not just the truce, not just the tension, but something warmer. Something that wasn't survival anymore. The fire had long since burned to glowing embers, and Elias awoke to a sudden stillness. Not quiet, stillness. The kind of silence that didn't come from peace but from absence. No wind, no insects, not even the soft splash of the stream that had lulled him into a half-sleep. Just frozen air and the eerie certainty that they were no longer alone. Cassera was already awake. She crouched low near the edge of their alcove, her tail drawn tightly around her legs, amber eyes locked on the tree lean above. She didn't move, didn't blink. Elias reached slowly for his sidearm. "They're close," she whispered. He tensed. The predator from before? No. Worse. She stood, wincing slightly from her half-healed leg. Her tone was cold now, clipped and calculating. "They've sent Vogar." Elias blinked. "I don't speak serene." She met his eyes. "Assassins. Royal ones. Trained to hunt and kill rogue bloodlines. Once their mark is set, they do not stop." He felt the heat drain from his chest. "How many?" "3, she said, sniffing the air. "One passed within 10 meters of us before turning back. They're circling, coordinating." Elias moved to pack up their gear. "We need to run." "No," she said, grabbing his wrist. "We need to disappear." They worked quickly, smothering the fire completely, masking the ash with rock dust, scattering their tracks with fresh branches. Cassera took point, her senses sharper than any scanner he'd ever used. She walked with fluid grace, favoring her leg only slightly, her body moving through the trees like she'd been born there. They crossed the stream and moved into the deeper wilds, navigating through gnarled roots and phosphorescent vines. It was colder here, darker, the trees twisted into shapes that looked too deliberate, too aware. Elias kept glancing behind them. Are you sure they can't track us? They already are, Cassera said without turning around. I'm only making it harder. How do we fight assassins? How do we fight assassins? We don't. Not unless they leave us no choice. They hiked for hours. At one point, they found an abandoned outpost, half consumed by the forest, its walls cracked open by vines and rust. Inside, Elias found a working plasma cell and slid it into his weapon with a click. Cassera rested against the frame of a shattered comms array, arms folded. She was quiet now, too quiet. You okay? He asked. She hesitated. If the Vogar were sent, it wasn't just protocol. Elias nodded slowly. Someone wants you dead. Someone powerful. It wasn't just abandonment, she whispered. It was a purge. She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw fear in her eyes. I'm not an exile, Elias. I'm a target. He stepped closer, his voice steady. Then they picked the wrong medic to follow you into hell. Her gaze lingered on him. She gave a slow, solemn nod. Then we survive, and we make them regret it. They climbed until the forest gave way to sky. The cliffs at Calvinar's edge weren't part of any map or terrain guide, they rose like ancient teeth, jagged and black, remnants of some long-dead volcano that now marked the planet's uppermost boundary. From here, the view stretched across miles of violet jungle and smoke-streaked sky, the collapsed summit a dark smudge in the distance. Elias reached the top first, extending a hand down to Cassera. She hesitated, wounded pride flickering behind her eyes, but then took it. Her claws curled briefly into his glove before letting go. Once she was stable, the wind was stronger up here, harsher. It held between stone pillars, carrying flakes of ash and tiny shards of obsidian dust. Cassera dropped her pack and moved to the cliff's edge, eyes scanning the horizon. Her tail flicked once, then stilled. They're still following, she murmured. Elias crouched beside her. How long before they catch up? Not long. We bought time with misdirection, not distance. Her voice was low, brittle. We can't keep outrunning them. He studied her face. She looked tired, exhaustion showing in the slump of her shoulders, the slow rise and fall of her chest. But underneath that, resolve. Then what do we do? She was quiet for a moment. We go to the ruins. Elias frowned. What ruins? My family's first stronghold on this world, she said. Buried during the expansion wars. The Dominion erased them from the maps, too much shame tied to how many lives were lost trying to take it. But I remember where it is. Will we find help there? No, she said simply. We'll find something better. Elias gave her a long look. You're not just trying to survive anymore. No, she said, facing the wind. I'm trying to win. The two sat in silence for a moment, the void before them deep and unforgiving. Then Cassera spoke again, voice lower now. You asked before about Valen. He wasn't my brother, he was my executioner, she corrected bitterly. He was supposed to be my second, my protector. He sat beside me during war briefings, ate with me, laughed with me. And the night before the summit, he vanished. No warning, just gone. Elias exhaled. You think he ordered the Vogar? I know he did. Her voice cracked. And not just because he wanted the throne. He believed the Dominion needed a ruler who would never show mercy. Elias watched her struggle with it, not just the betrayal, but what it meant for everything she'd stood for. You're not him, Elias said. I was raised by the same laws. Maybe, Elias said, standing beside her, but I've walked beside you, and if you were him, I'd be dead by now. She turned, amber eyes flickering in the fading light. Something softened there. Then, without a word, she turned back to the drop and pointed to the northern ridge line, barely visible through the haze. There, she said. That's where we go. He nodded. Then let's finish this. The ruins emerged at dusk, buried beneath the roots of a petrified mountain. They descended into a basin carved by time and fire, cracked obsidian slabs jutted from the soil like broken armor, and old walls, half swallowed by earth, still bore the faded crest of the ancient serene bloodlines. A once great fortress lay scattered in bones and stone, its glory long since devoured by Calvinar's wilds. Elias stared up at the remnants. This was your family's? Cassera nodded. This was where our line first declared dominion. It's where they spilled the blood that built the throne. She stepped forward, her gait slowing as she neared a tall arch choked in moss. The markings carved into its face pulsed faintly beneath the growth, activated by her proximity. Old serene glyphs blinked to life, soft gold, responding to royal blood. The wind quieted. Still works, Elias murmured. Some things don't forget, she said. Inside the ruins, the halls were silent, dust and roots curling through doorways, relics scattered like forgotten memories. But the structure beneath remained intact. They moved slowly, their boots echoing in the long-dead corridors, until Cassera stopped at a sealed chamber. The door had no handles, only a smooth interface and a single glowing mark at chest height. She placed her palm on it. A chime, then the door slid open with a breath of old air and light. Inside was a circular chamber lined with data pillars, ancient consoles, and a single dais at the center, surrounded by crystalline fragments. The air buzzed faintly with dormant energy. This is the core vault, Cassera said softly. Every royal line encoded their visions here, decrees, secrets, confessions. 1,000 years of our shame, locked away. She walked to the dais and knelt. Her claw traced the sigil on the stone, and the room surged to life. Holograms flared upward, ghostly figures clad in ceremonial armor, their faces proud and solemn. One of them looked exactly like her. Elias stepped closer. That's you. Cassera didn't answer. Her expression was unreadable. The projection spoke. I am Serene of Flameborn House. My blood forged the first dominion, but it will not see the last. We have become cruel, efficient, but empty. We have severed love from strength and called it wisdom. But if you are hearing this, and you wear my face, then you are my heir, and you will choose another way. The image faded. Silence returned. Cassera stared at the empty air where the hologram had hovered. I was told she died in battle, she whispered, that she fell fighting rebels. But she came here to warn us. Elias stepped beside her. Your legacy isn't conquest. No, she said, rising slowly. It's the choice to change. Outside, the wind howled again, but this time it wasn't alone. Footsteps echoed in the ruins. Cassera's ears flicked. She grabbed Elias's arm. They're here. The first sound was soft, a displaced pebble skittering across ancient stone. Then came the scrape of metal. Cassera spun, blade already drawn from her hip sheath. The edge shimmered with low energy, a fusion saber forged from one of the old house's forges. The sound of boots followed, soft, deliberate. 3 pairs. The Vogar, she growled. Elias raised his rifle, taking cover beside a cracked support column. 3 targets. Cassera nodded, ears sharp and forward. They don't speak, they don't threaten, they only end. A flash of movement, then silence again. Elias's pulse ticked faster, sweat forming along the grip of his rifle. He whispered, they're toying with us. No, Cassera whispered back. They're calculating angles. They kill from precision, not intimidation. A blur of silver dropped from the ceiling. Elias dove. Plasma screeched past his face, melting a deep scar into the stone behind him. He rolled and returned fire, catching only a shimmer of motion before the figure vanished into the shadows. Another assassin dropped behind Cassera, but she was ready. Her blade sang as it swept low, forcing the Vogar into a backflip. He landed silently on the vault dais and drew twin daggers that vibrated in the air like live wires. Elias opened fire again. One shot clipped the shoulder of the third assassin, who darted from the corridor and vaulted behind a pillar, still silent, still deliberate. "They're splitting us," Elias called. Cassera didn't respond. She lunged, her blade meeting her attackers with a crack of energy. Sparks danced across the floor as they clashed, fluid, elegant, brutal. The assassin moved like water, but Cassera had fire in her blood now. This was her fortress, her family stone, and she would not fall here. Elias kept the other two pinned with cover fire, using the ancient consoles as barricades. A sudden jolt of pain stabbed his shoulder. One of the Vogars throwing knives had grazed him. He hissed, blood blooming beneath his armor. "Cassera!" She heard the cry, broke her parry, and spun, throwing her blade across the chamber. It embedded in the shoulder of the assassin who had wounded Elias. The attacker staggered, dropping to one knee. Elias didn't hesitate. He surged forward and drove the butt of his rifle into the figure's visor, cracking it clean through. The Vogar crumpled. The other two paused. Cassera retrieved her blade and stood tall, tail lashing behind her. "You've failed," she growled. One of the remaining Vogar charged anyway, a final, desperate assault. But Cassera anticipated the move. She sidestepped, slashed low, and finished the strike with a brutal upward arc. The assassin fell, silent as promised. Only one remained. But instead of attacking, the last Vogar lowered their weapon and slowly knelt. Elias lowered his rifle, stunned. "What the hell?" Cassera's chest rose and fell in slow breaths. "She's not here to kill me," she said softly. "She's here to witness." The assassin removed her helm, revealing a vulpine face marked with ancient ceremonial ink, symbols of the first line. Her voice was clear, reverent, "I have seen the fire of the old blood. The flameborn rises again." Then she stood, turned, and vanished into the shadows, leaving only silence and smoke. Dawn over Calvinar Prime came blood-red. From their perch above the valley, Elias and Cassera looked down at the sprawling capital, Verkale, the shining heart of the serene dominion. Its towers shimmered like daggers jutting into the sky, and the citadel's spire loomed above them all, dark and monolithic. At its peak, banners of Valen's house snapped in the wind, their silver crests reflecting the rising sun. Cassera clenched her fists. "That throne was never meant for him," she said, her voice raw with certainty. "He betrayed blood, he betrayed me." Elias stood beside her, adjusting the pack slung over his shoulder. "Then we take it back." She glanced at him. "You say that like we're raiding a supply depot, not walking into the core of my brother's power." He shrugged. "We've done worse." A small smile tugged at her lips, then faded. "Do you remember the vault we found?" she asked. "There's more in it than just words. Flameborn tech, buried, forbidden. Enough to override the Dominion's planetary relay systems." Elias blinked. "You mean broadcast to everyone?" "All of them," she said. "Every station, every city, even off-world colonies. If I speak from that node, no one can stop it. And if you die on that stage?" Her eyes flared. "Then they'll still hear the truth." They began their descent under cover of a heavy dust storm that swept across the southern ridge. The Vogar's last survivor had sent word ahead to loyal remnants of the flame, a signal Elias didn't fully understand, but Cassera trusted. By the time they reached the outer wall of Verkale, two cloaked figures were waiting, former royal guards, disavowed, exiled, and now reborn in rebellion. One handed Cassera a fresh set of armor, black, trimmed in burning orange, sleeker than her former ceremonial regalia. Forged in the old way, it bore the mark of the flameborn crest, the tail of a phoenix coiled around a crescent blade. Cassera slid it on without ceremony. When she turned to Elias, something in her had changed. More than resolve, it was command. He watched her ascend the ramp into the city's underbelly, slums, maintenance corridors, forgotten access routes. They moved like ghosts through steam-filled tunnels, climbing through shafts and abandoned railways until, finally, hours later, they reached a service conduit just below the Citadel's main stage. Through a vent, they could hear Valen speaking, for the future of the Dominion. For strength. For unity. Cassara's lips curled. Elias prepped the data shard they'd taken from the vault. You ready to ruin his party? She took it, slid it into a recessed slot on her vambrace, and nodded. I'm ready to reclaim what's mine. The sound of ceremonial horns rang through the vaulted corridors of the Citadel, their notes sharp and triumphant. The chamber above them, massive, open to the sky, was packed with thousands. Royal guards lined every archway, and nobles stood shoulder to shoulder on balconies carved into the walls, their eyes fixed on the black stone platform at the center and on Valen. Clad in flowing silver robes, his violet eyes gleamed beneath the raised hood of his crown regalia. He looked every inch the ruler, calm, commanding, unstoppable. Let this day mark a new era, he boomed, voice carried through amplified relays. Let the age of fractured weakness end. I claim the throne of the Dominion not by inheritance, but by strength. Applause erupted. Elias crouched beneath the stage, kneeling beside the override panel embedded in the old Dominion relay column. Wires sprawled like veins across the stone. Above him, shadows danced across the platform as Valen continued his speech. The old blood was poison, Valen declared. Weakness masquerading as wisdom. But I have purged that weakness. The flame-born line ends with me. The crowd roared approval. Cassara's fingers found the activation switch on her vambrace. The data shard pulsed with ancient light. She looked at Elias one last time, and he saw not the wounded princess he'd carried from the burning summit, but the rightful heir of a bloodline that had chosen love over conquest. Now, she whispered. Elias slammed his palm against the override panel. The relay system shrieked to life, sparks cascading from every connection point. Above them, Valen's voice cut off mid-sentence as every screen, every speaker, every communication device across the planet, and beyond, flickered and died. Then they came alive again, broadcasting a single signal. Cassara stepped into the light. She emerged from the shadows beneath the platform like a phoenix rising from ash. Her black and orange armor gleamed, the flame-born crest blazing across her chest. The ceremonial blade at her side hummed with energy, and her amber eyes burned with the fire of 1,000 generations. The crowd gasped. Nobles stumbled backward. Even the royal guards hesitated, their weapons wavering. Valen's face went white beneath his hood. Impossible, he breathed. The Vogar confirmed. The Vogar knelt, Cassara said, her voice carrying across every speaker in the Dominion. They witnessed the return of the true flame. She walked up the steps to the platform, each footfall echoing like thunder. You tried to bury our history, Valen. You tried to erase what we were, what we could become. But some truths refuse to die. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered, then blazed to life with images from the core vault. The face of the first flame-born appeared, speaking her ancient words, "We have severed love from strength and called it wisdom." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Confusion. Recognition. Understanding. This is what you tried to hide, Cassara continued, her voice steady and strong. The knowledge that strength without compassion is hollow. That a ruler who abandons their people at the first sign of weakness is no ruler at all. Valen drew his blade, a magnificent weapon of silver and starlight. You are a relic, he snarled. A weak, sentimental fool who would drag us back to the days of defeat. No, Cassara said, drawing her own sword. The fusion edge sang as it ignited. I would take us forward to the days of redemption. They circled each other on the platform, two ideologies given flesh and steel. Around them, the crowd watched in stunned silence as the fate of their civilization balanced on the edge of two blades. Valen struck first, a lightning-fast thrust meant to end the duel before it began. But Cassera had learned from more than royal tutors. She had learned from a human medic who carried his wounded through smoke and fire, who chose mercy over expedience, hope over fear. She parried, stepped inside his guard, and struck. Not to kill, never to kill. To disarm. To defeat. To prove that strength could exist without cruelty. Valen's blade went flying. He crashed to his knees, clutching his wounded wrist, and for the first time in his life, he looked small. Cassera stood over him, her sword at his throat. The crowd held its breath. "This is where the old ways would demand your death," she said quietly, loud enough for every broadcasting device to carry her words to the stars. "But I am not the old ways." She lowered her blade. "I am Princess Cassera of the Flame-born House, rightful heir to the Serene Dominion. And I choose a different path." She turned to address the crowd, the cameras, the universe. "We will be strong, but our strength will protect, not conquer. We will be proud, but our pride will build, not destroy. And we will remember that the greatest victory is not the one that breaks our enemies, but the one that shows them a better way." The platform erupted in chaos. Some cheered. Some shouted in outrage. The royal guards looked to each other, uncertain which orders to follow. But from the crowd, a single voice rose above the rest, an old soldier, scarred and weathered, raising his fist in salute. "Flame-born," he cried. Another voice joined him. Then another. Within moments, the chant echoed through the citadel and across the broadcast networks, "Flame-born. Flame-born. Flame-born." Elias emerged from beneath the platform, his rifle slung over his shoulder, a grin spreading across his dirt-stained face. He climbed the steps to stand beside Cassera as the crowd's cheers washed over them like a tide. "Not bad for a stubborn human and an illogical princess," he said. She looked at him, her amber eyes bright with tears she didn't try to hide. "We did it." "No," Elias said, watching the crowd, watching history being made. "You did it. I just carried you until you could walk." Cassera smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since the summit. "Maybe," she said. "But I couldn't have walked this far alone." Above them, the twin suns of Calvinar Prime set behind the citadel's spires, painting the sky in shades of gold and flame. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Serene Dominion looked toward a dawn built not on conquest, but on the radical idea that even enemies could become something more. The revolution had begun not with blood, but with the simple choice to carry someone who had fallen. And in that choice, an empire found its soul. The reconstruction of the Grand Accord Assembly was nearly complete. Where once the building had been a monument to careful neutrality, it now stood as a symbol of genuine cooperation. Human and serene engineers worked side by side, their designs interweaving like the friendship that had sparked this new age. Captain Elias Ward, now bearing the title of Cultural Ambassador, though he still insisted everyone just call him Elias, stood in the northern gallery where he'd first seen the summit begin. The view was the same, but everything else had changed. Below, Princess Cassera addressed a mixed assembly of humans and Serenes, their representatives no longer seated in rigid, opposing blocks but mingled throughout the chamber. She wore simple robes now, still bearing the flame-born crest, but in colors that spoke of peace rather than war. "The work is not finished," she was saying, her voice carrying the same authority it had that day on the platform, but tempered with the wisdom of governing rather than conquering. "It may never be finished. But every day we choose compassion over convenience, understanding over expedience, we write another page in a story that neither of our peoples could have written alone." Elias smiled. She'd gotten better at speeches. A soft sound made him turn. A young serene aide approached, carrying a data pad. "Ambassador Ward. We've received confirmation from the outer colonies. The last of the Vogar cells have agreed to the amnesty terms." "All of them?" All of them. They're requesting formal reintegration into the new Royal Guard. Under your joint command structure, of course. Elias nodded. Even the assassins, it seemed, could learn to choose a different path. Make sure they understand the new rules. No abandoned wounded. No severance codes. We carry each other, or we don't call ourselves soldiers. Yes, sir. As the aide departed, Elias felt a familiar presence beside him. Cassera had finished her address and climbed to the gallery. She still moved with that fluid grace, though she no longer had to hide the slight limp from her old injuries. Battle scars, she'd learned, weren't signs of weakness, they were proof of survival. How did it go? He asked. 3 trade disputes, 2 territorial negotiations, and 1 marriage proposal between royal houses. She leaned against the railing beside him. I think we're finally becoming boring. Good. Boring is underrated. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the delegates below shake hands, share meals, laugh at each other's jokes. It wasn't perfect, there were still tensions, still cultural barriers that would take generations to fully bridge. But it was a start. Elias? Cassara's voice was thoughtful. Yeah. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd followed protocol that day? If you'd evacuated with the other humans and left me in the rubble? He considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But then I remember something my old sergeant used to say, the right choice is usually the hard choice, and the hard choice is usually the one that keeps you up at night wondering if you did enough. She turned to look at him. And do you wonder if you did enough? Elias gestured to the chamber below, where a human child was showing a young Serene how to fold paper airplanes while their parents negotiated resource-sharing agreements. Look around, princess. I think we did just fine. Cassera smiled, that same genuine expression that had first appeared around a campfire in the violet forest, now worn with the ease of someone who had learned that strength and gentleness could coexist. Just Cassera, she corrected, as she had every day for 6 months. We're past formalities, don't you think? Just Cassera, he agreed. The twin suns of Calvinar Prime were setting again, casting their golden light through the crystalline domes of the new Grand Accord. But this time, the light fell not on carefully neutral territory, but on ground that had been consecrated by the simple act of refusing to leave someone behind. And in that refusal, 2 species had found something neither conquest nor diplomacy had ever given them, a future they could build together, one carried step at a time.